Celtics starting point guard Derrick White says he would love to sign an extension with the Boston Celtics once his contract is up. I'll be getting into that. Plus, Kristaps Porzingis and Team Latvia have an interesting strategy holding him out of some games to reduce injury risk. And finally, is there any validity or any reason the Celtics should bring back Blake Griffin? I think so, and I'll explain that to you on this edition of Celtics Digest. Let's get into the first topic today, and that's a Derrick White extension update. So Derrick White, of course, now that Marcus Smart has been traded to the Memphis Grizzlies, Derrick White is getting slotted into the starting point guard role. Head coach Joe Mazzulla has said as much. He said, no, Derrick is going to be our starting point guard this year, and last season was a career year for him, averaging over 12 points a game, 3.5 boards, 3.5 assists, while being one of the best defenders in the NBA. And he was asked recently about whether or not he'd like to sign an extension with the Boston Celtics because he's only under contract for this year and next year at about $17 million per. You see, his salary is about $17.6 for 23-24 and $18.8 for 24-25. He said, I love being here in Boston. It'd be cool to get an extension. There's an opportunity from the end of September to the start of the upcoming season to get that done, to which White expressed, quote, we'll see what happens during that window, but I've loved my time in Boston so far, and my focus right now is just on the season. So Derrick White, trying to stay pretty humble, trying to say, look, I just want to focus on this season, and that's very fair because Derrick White last season had probably the biggest role of his career. While he was in San Antonio, right, him and DeJounte Murray were kind of that 1-2 punch at the guard spot, and then Murray got traded, and then White got traded, but then with Marcus Smart being gone and Brogdon having injury issues, Derrick White is going to have the biggest workload of his entire career coming up this season. And is he ready for the task? Well, I certainly think so. You have Jaylen Brown, you have Jayson Tatum, you have Kristaps Porzingis, and they're all going to help him out. He's a 29-year-old combo guard. He's transitioning to operating primarily as the floor general, which again is not something he's necessarily done a ton in the past. And the host, he told Malika Andrews that he doesn't expect that shift to be a big adjustment. Quote, I'll just have the ball in my hands more, which I've done pretty much most of my career. So just getting back to that and getting the guys in the right spot, obviously with Jayson Tatum, Jaylen Brown, Kristaps Porzingis, I've got a lot of talented guys around me. That makes my job pretty easy, and he's very right. Right, whenever you're the floor general for a team and you have three all NBA level players when healthy, it's pretty easy to just, defer to them if you need to. But Derrick White has never been that elite level passer, but that's the thing, he doesn't need to be that. Coming up this season, he just needs to be a solid presence, knock down his open shots, continue his physical play, getting to the rim, and making the right plays at the right time while maintaining a level of being probably a top 5 perimeter defender in the NBA. And I think that's really where Derrick White's value is going to come. Again, especially with Marcus Smart being traded away, that perimeter defense, yes, Jaylen Brown has some, but even as Brown has said, the Celtics' defensive identity without Marcus Smart isn't quite the same. And Brown said, look, I signed this extension. Defense needs to be our focus. That's how we're going to win games. And that honestly all starts. You might think with Jaylen Brown, but no, it's going to start with Derrick White. Yes, you have Kristaps, who's an elite rim protector behind him. Yes, you have Jaylen Brown, who's an elite wing defender. But Derrick White is the guy guarding the point of attack, right? The other point guard's coming down the floor, initiating the play. Derrick White is the one that's going to need to disturb that point guard and bother them every single play. So he's going to be so crucial to the Celtics' success. And if he proves that he can do that in the higher workload, which I don't see any reason why he couldn't do that, he's going to deserve an extension. And personally, I would love to see him long-term in Boston. Now, I've spoken a bit about Kristaps Porzingis already, and we got some pretty awesome news if you're a Celtics fan, because of course, after trading for Kristaps Porzingis, a lot of people are very excited at the idea of a 7'3" stretch 5 who's averaged 20 and 10 over his career basically. He's just an amazing, amazing player that fits perfectly with the Boston Celtics, but with the big caveat that he's often very injured. He's missed over 15, 20 games in most of his seasons. He's had so many injury issues. But what's good news is that in a tournament like a World Cup type tournament, typically, we've seen some news in the past, the number one thing that stands out is Yao Ming, who has worked like crazy with Team China to make sure that he represents the country well. You see these countries often working their players hard so that they can win, and especially for a team like Latvia, which isn't the biggest basketball talent in the world. Of course, they have Porzingis, they have Bertans, and a couple other guys who played in the NBA. They're really not that amazing, so you'd think they'd really need Porzingis to put in every bit of effort. But check out what the head coach said. Well, we can see first that Porzingis and Bertans missed the last warm-up game or, pre-tournament game, and Giannis Tima and Anzej Pasechniks were not dressed for the game at all, and all four have health issues. which is a bit of a worry, regardless. Like, the fact that Porzingis already has a bit of a health issue, but we kind of knew that a little bit anyway. It is expected that all four will again miss the next prep game, but in a post-game comment, head coach Luka Banton said that there would be little playing time for Porzingis in prep games before the World Cup in order to decrease injury risk. Next game will be Saturday in Arena Riga when Latvia faces Georgia. So I think this is awesome. I really do, because Kristaps Porzingis, again, just making sure that he's not being put at risk of injury is the best thing you can do, not only for Latvia's hopes at the World Cup, but also for the Boston Celtics. And it seems like Team Latvia knows this, and it seems like they care very much about Porzingis' long-term health, because it's not just this tournament. While the World Cup of basketball is huge, for basketball, the World Cup isn't as big as the Olympics, and we've seen that many times. Like in football, soccer, World Cup is the biggest stage, basically. But in basketball, not so much. Even though you get a lot of good talent from most countries, it's, a little bit less. But at the same time, Team Latvia knows Porzingis is like their star for years and years to come in every tournament. They don't want to risk him getting a really bad injury, and they know that the Boston Celtics don't want him to risk getting a really bad injury. And if he gets an injury in this tournament or something, maybe in the future the Celtics will recommend him not to play for Team Latvia. So there's a lot of other factors going on here, but regardless, the fact that Team Latvia is taking their time with Porzingis, just reducing the injury risk as much as possible to make sure he's as healthy as possible, is not only good news for Team Latvia, it's good news for Kristaps Porzingis himself, and great news for the Boston Celtics. Final topic today. It's a bit of an interesting one because Blake Griffin is still not signed, and the Celtics, they kind of cut Champagnie, so there's a little bit of a roster spot open, right? And Blake Griffin would fit right into that roster spot, right? Well, why not bring him back? Blake Griffin won some games for the Celtics last year. When he was able to slot in for Al Horford, he really used his physicality somehow. It seemed like he's over the hill, but no, he's in there. He's going really, really well, using his effort, using his strength, using his body to get some rebounds, play good defense, even if it's in slightly limited minutes. So why won't the Celtics just sign Blake Griffin? So, of course, waiving Champagnie is kind of an interesting decision because the 15th spot on the roster can and often does remain open into the regular season. That places an emphasis on opening the 14th spot sooner rather than later if a desired target becomes available. But clearly the Celtics aren't after someone like PJ Washington, Oubre, Green, or Derrick Jones Jr. They've been out there for a while. The Celtics, they're probably not going to create room to pursue any of them. But why not go for Blake Griffin? The door remains open for his return, but the problem is his family's all on the West Coast. Of course, he played in LA forever, and he played at University of Oklahoma. He's kind of not so much an East Coast guy. Now, I know Oklahoma's not the West Coast, Midwest, but give me a break. But given that he mulled his options until October last year, it's worth assuming he'll follow a similarly deliberative process this summer, and his veteran status allows the team to sign him for a second-year salary on the cap sheet, $2 million this year, which is actually less than what Champagnie would have made. So all things sure seem to be lining up because the salary hit's going to be almost nothing. Again, he waited until October last year. A lot of people say the veterans kind of do that so that they don't have to do the training in the offseason to kind of save their body. They don't need to be with the team and do all this. They kind of just rest, do their own thing, and then start the season, which is also possible, especially for Blake Griffin, whose body has almost betrayed him for this second half of his career. But I think it could be a great fit. I don't see why not. He can still contribute. He showed that last year. His cap hit would be almost minimal, and he's just a nice veteran presence to have on the team. Now, yes, that means the Celtics kind of big man rotation. You have Al Horford and Blake Griffin in it, which is a bit of an aging big man core, but it's not really their core, right? Because they still have Porzingis, they still have Robert Williams, and they still have Tatum who can easily play the 4, so you can shift around the lineups a bunch. Griffin's not going to be asked to play every game. He'll probably play a handful of games or maybe even half the games, step in whenever Horford needs a rest. He's just a nice insurance policy, and he still has the talent to be on the NBA court. And for signing less than or just about $2 million, what's the downside, right? If you're signing a young player to that spot, you're probably not going to get him playing time. He's probably going to be more of a G League level guy who's just not going to get into any actual games. And is that really beneficial over having a proven NBA talent who can step in when you need him to? I think Blake Griffin is an amazing idea to bring back to the Boston Celtics if he decides to come back. Of course, family comes first for him, I'm sure, at this point. But if he decides to come back to the Celtics, I think he'd be welcomed with open arms. That'll do it for this edition of Celtics Digest. If you enjoyed, leave a like, comment, subscribe to the channel, help push us in the YouTube algorithm, because this is your #1 source for Boston Celtics news. I'm your host, Josh Gosse. We'll catch you in the next one.